Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen, and we're with comic Bob Biggerstaff. Bob Biggerstaff, how the hell are you?
Doing all right, Brian. How are you?
Oh, good. I'm doing so great. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Hey, man, no problem.
And
What else have I got to do in these trying times?
Well, it sounds like you've been keeping yourself busy, at least with G-Hole, which is your G-Hole is a cool name in and of itself, but it stands for Greatest Hour of Listening Ever, and you do that with Ray DeVito, and you do that a couple times a week.
The G-Hole podcast. Yes, that's true. It's we have a fun time.
Yeah, you got some big guests on there. I see you had David Tell, and you had Matthew Broussard, and you also had Nick Griffin, and there was one more just
Dan Soder.
Yeah, Dan Soder, the biggest names ever, man.
Yeah, well, as comics, you run into obviously other comics all the time, but those guys are actually all old friends of mine. Like Attell, I've known Attell for over 20 years. I actually opened for him on his HBO special, Captain Miserable. That was about 12 years ago.
Wow.
But another Nick Griffin, I worked with him once in Minneapolis, and actually one of my jokes, and the title of my last album called Enjoy Guys, was a bit that I created because I was with Nick. So he always has a special place in my heart. And, you keep in touch with guys. I've always been the kind of guy if I work with somebody, you'll get their phone number and keep in touch just through texting throughout the years. And, I moved to New York a couple of years ago and get to actually see and hang out do shows with these guys now, all the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're a comedy. You do the Comedy Cellar a lot. You're a regular there, so a lot of the times you're probably playing with these people too, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, and especially now, like I said, nowadays nobody can really tell you they don't have time to do your podcast nowadays. That's a funny thing. Like Sam, real funny guy, Sam Morrill. I'm sure you know who he is if you're a comedy fan.
Just had a special.
He tweeted one time, he was like, "So you're telling me I never had to go to your apartment to do your podcast?" Because everybody's doing them now. I mean, heck, we're doing this on Skype. People are doing them on Zoom, all the whatever virtual podcasts. So it's much easier. I mean, Ray DeVito, my buddy that I do the podcast with, we we've always told people before all the quarantine, we would always tell people big names, I should say. We'd be like, hey, we can come to your apartment and do the podcast. You don't have to come to see us because I don't know if David Tell's not going to come out to Astoria. I mean, we're buddies, but he's not going to come out to go to Ray's apartment to do a podcast. I wouldn't expect him to.
Yeah.
And so we were always like, because I had asked him before, and he was always up to do it. We could just never set anything up, and we didn't know where we would do it. And I was like, we can come to your apartment. I mean, hell, you probably got a lobby. We could stand there, whatever. Because before, it really is amazing how, before the quarantine, nobody ever wanted to do podcasts this way through Skype or certain. Well, I shouldn't say Skype, because actually that seemed to be the one thing, before Zoom came out or whatever.
Yeah.
But people didn't want to do podcasts, over the phone or whatever, whether it was over the phone or even over your computer like this, because it was just looked at as, if you can't have somebody there with. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you ever did anything before all the quarantine over the phone with somebody. or
No, yeah.
a Skype podcast. People didn't want to do it because they're like, no, the audio isn't. Well, I mean, now the the audio is way better than it used to be.
Right.
But
But also
my point,
everybody's audio blows though. You hear all the shitty audio going on right now because everybody has the same issue. Everybody's doing it remotely.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I realize obviously it's you either do it like this, or I mean, I know the world's opening up a little bit, but a month ago, 2 months ago, it was like, well, if you want to do a podcast, this is how you're doing it, or you're
Yeah.
not doing it unless you're just going to do it with whoever you live with.
Yeah, and
It's just I realize it it changed obviously because of a massive change in the world, but it'll be interesting to see when all this is over how many people are still doing podcasts like this.
Yeah, and I would think like it's a way to kind of keep up peer-to-peer contact across the country. Like I had Joe Gorman on, and he was talking about the fact that his podcast can he can keep up with his people there in LA or his people in San Francisco or in Jersey. And I said, I think that people will at least use this to supplement it going forward, because isn't it going to be easier to travel to a new city to do stand-up comedy if or have Skyped with 20 comics in that city?
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
And,
I mean, you used to do. I mean, you would do this weren't you doing it at the QED?
Yeah, we did about 80 at QED. It was so easy, and I think that's how I got in touch with you, because you're pretty local.
Yeah.
If I would have told you it was in New Jersey, you would have been like, "Why don't you come to my lobby, bitch?"
Pretty sure I probably wouldn't have gone to New Jersey to do your podcast. I hate
Dude, I think I've
had to be honest.
I've had a guest come from Jersey. I've had a guest come from like Long Island, and some of their commute times are just hellish. And so it's so nice that they do that. But one cool thing I liked about G-Hole is in the description on Libsyn, which I think is your podcast host.
Yes.
It says that at some point you guys were having guests reveal their guilty pleasures or unpopular opinions. In a tribute to the G-Hole podcast, I'd like you to reveal a guilty pleasure or two, if you could.
Well, it's funny when we started doing that, I was like, well, nobody's gonna reveal something that's huge. Like, let's say, I'm like, I don't expect anybody to come, and we'd be like, so what's your guilty pleasure? And they're like, well, I'm gay.
Yeah, I like sucking dick, to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah, and if a guy said, that would be for someone to actually reveal something that they've never told anybody. Because when we would ask people to do that, we'd say some people would be like, well, what do you mean by guilty pleasure? And I was like, well, we don't. Obviously, you're not gonna tell us a huge secret that you've never told anybody.
Right.
Just something that you might be a little embarrassed about if people knew, but it's not going to destroy you that people know it. Like I said,
you're setting them up for comedy, really. I mean, they could make anything up if they wanted to.
I mean, mine's definitely, yeah. I'm like, yeah, whatever you say, we're gonna make fun of it. So be prepared for that. But we had guys on there that were like, we had some young kid that he played Magic the Gathering.
Oh, okay.
And it was like, and he would go to tournaments and stuff, and he just didn't want people. And I was like, well, I mean, you are a geek. You're, nerdy looking guy. I go, that's not really it. I go, I can imagine anybody you tell is probably like, okay, yeah, that's not, if you were like, oh, I'm getting so much pussy, then guys might be like, no way, nerd.
I love it.
That's not happening. But myself, I mean, this is definitely kind of lame, but I used to collect bobbleheads.
Oh, cool.
Like any kind of bobblehead, whether it was like the regular traditional size. But I would I had a bunch of bobbleheads. I can't necessarily say it was guilty. I mean, when I would tell people about it, they'd be some people thought it was kind of weird, but actually probably a better one would be I mean, I watch way too many reality shows that I don't tell people about.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. Which one are you on?
Like, well, I watch like those the ones where people weigh like 600 pounds.
Ah, that
Like
hits too close to home for me. I'm a little bit overweight.
there's a show. Well, me too, but I'm not that fat.
Right.
But I watch them just to laugh.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Yeah. So how
I
do they
mean, I
get
hate.
around? What's the whole show? Is it just them kind of walking
Well, there's a
from
show
the living
called
room to the kitchen?
My 600 Pound Life. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them can walk, some of them can't.
But what's the
But
show though? Don't aren't they pretty housebound? It's probably a pretty boring show. I mean, I guess they're probably crying about their issues.
well, I'm from Houston, and
Yeah.
Houston is has won the title of Houston of fattest city a few times, and part of that show is the doctor who works on them is in Houston.
Oh,
So I
that's
think that kind of, and my girlfriend watches it all the time. She kind of go, I mean, she doesn't know that I actually watch it now.
okay.
She just hates watching it with me because like she'll be watching it and then I'll just be like, Jesus Christ, look at this. I mean, you know, and honestly, those shows are I'm not going to say they're unintentionally funny, but a lot of those types of shows people watch because they're, and these are shows where, people have health problems, but,
Yeah.
you're making, when they show like this lady that goes to, she goes to like a buffet and, she weighs like 600 pounds and you're just like, I'm just laughing because, there's this gigantic, and then she's on this show and they're talking about her getting stomach stapling or whatever you want to call it. It's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, did they take her to a buffet? Was she like, well, I don't want to go there? And they're like, no, this is good for the show. You gotta like that show. Remember that show, The Biggest Loser?
Yeah, sure.
Which I used to say I was disappointed when it came out because I thought it was just going to be a show where just people from reality shows walked out and you're like, yeah, fuck you, you loser. But like that show, The Biggest Loser, that was the funniest. That was one of the funniest shows ever that I've seen on TV. Just because they would embarrass these people, and I'm like, well, they want to do it. Of course they make the guys. When they weigh in, they take their shirts off.
Yeah.
Fuck you. I'm not. I remember people would ask me like, why don't you go on that show? And I'm like, because I'm not gonna fucking stand there with my shirt off.
Yeah. So it's like some of these things.
At least not the before photo.
So the writing process, I mean, like the kind of evilness of the producers is one more thing that makes you laugh. It's like, yeah, you evil fucks. Why are you taking this woman to the buffet, and why are you making them take their shirts off?
Yeah, I mean, those are. I guess you could say those are two different shows. I mean, they are two different shows, right. But the with this My 600 Pound Life, and also that show, it's never like the person that's 600 pounds is never, they're not like a rich person.
Yeah.
They always seem to be some fucking redneck that like lives in a trailer or something.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I like
what kind of reality show would you go on?
Well, I mean, I was on Last Comic Standing a couple of times.
Oh yeah, what was that like? Were the producers making you do shit that would make for great television that was somehow embarrassing? I remember that one guy had to. Sometimes they make you be a tour guide or something. Was there any kind of thing you were embarrassed to do, but you had to because you were on the show?
No, I mean, unfortunately, I think that's where they. Yeah, I mean, what do I know about programming a show? But that was one of the things that I thought they missed out on Last Comic Standing was not having the. Well, there were two things. One was not having like a Simon Cowell type judge,
right? That
would get people to, just because somebody's famous doesn't mean they're going to watch the show. Get somebody to judge who's like an actual, like, an asshole like Simon Cowell was. And the other thing was, all the extra stuff they had people do just wasn't. None of it was ever compelling.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't remember. The one time I made it to the semifinals and got to go to Vegas, I mean, they had us. We didn't. There were no. It wasn't the finals, so I didn't get to do like any challenges or anything. But I mean, going to Vegas was fun. But they don't have you do anything as far as challenges or doing like you said, being a tour guide or something like that until you if I had made the finals.
Okay.
But it was but even that, like, almost, I mean, obviously, even though I didn't make the finals, I still got stuff out of it. It still bumped up my career.
Yeah.
But almost everybody that ever did that show as a comic, I'm sure they were all like, I don't really want to do this. Because well, I mean, as comedians, comedy's a subjective art form.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say when people are judging it, I mean, in my mind, the only way to judge a comedy contest is laughs and originality.
Okay.
That's the only two things that matter to me when I watch a comedian are people laughing and is what they're doing original.
Right.
I can even watch people and be like, I don't get it. Why are people laughing at this? But if the crowd's laughing and they're doing something original, then I'm like, I would tell everybody, yeah, this guy's great.
Yeah. You wouldn't put him on your show, but he'd be a draw though.
Well, I mean, no, well, see, that's the thing. I can look at it and say, well, no, people are laughing. Yeah. I just don't get it. So, I mean, if it doesn't go with the theme of a show I'm trying to do, maybe they talk about stuff that that if I'm putting a show together and the other comics and they're way different, but that's not really going to matter to me in as far as, like I said, if people are laughing, because the reason I have the second thing of being original is because there's plenty of comedians you can watch and they kill but then you're like, yeah, but they're not, this guy's doing old jokes. He's got old premises. There's nothing original to it. Like you can't say, oh, that's him. No, that's not him, because other people are doing those. I mean, not like they're stealing jokes. I mean, that would definitely be something, but
airport jokes, Sarah McLachlan commercial.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. If the crowd's liking it, okay, fine. That's fine, but that's not the same thing as, someone getting the same amount of laughs and doing original material.
Yeah. Now, if it's not hackery, and people are still laughing like crazy, and you don't get it, does that make you think, like maybe I should kind of, dive into why the fuck everybody's laughing and I'm not? Does it make you kind of think about it a little bit?
Well, yeah, of course it does. I mean, there's a lot of, I'm very dumb when it comes to politics.
Oh, okay.
I mean, obviously I know the players, but I have to think a second to be like, is Donald Trump a Republican or a Democrat? Because I don't. And honestly, thinking about it now, I'm not sure.
Right.
and it's not I'm not sure because of his politics or whatever. I don't even know. I can't even think of it.
Oh, I love it.
So when someone will, a lot of times nowadays, people say a joke and then it'll be about politics and, and they're like fucking Trump and everybody laughs. And I'm like, okay, well, I get that. I get those kind of things. But like when somebody like gets into, somebody's policies or something, and I'm like, I have no fucking idea what they're talking about.
Well, that lends itself to the next question, which might be too private to answer, but are you a voter?
I can honestly say I voted in the last presidential election because a buddy of mine said he would buy me lunch. And that's the only time I voted, and I voted for the person that lost.
Okay, all right. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess my unpopular stance, which I would have revealed
and we went to a pizza buffet after we voted.
and they filmed it for the 200-pound life.
Oh, damn it! Yeah, I wish it was 250.
But my embarrassing thing is I've never voted. So I'm a former lawyer who knows everything about the process, and I do not vote.
And why don't you vote?
Well, first of all, I
I
don't really think it matters. I'm usually coming from liberal states like, Chicago, Illinois, or New York City, so it really doesn't matter oftentimes. But also, then you get called for jury duty. The only
okay.
time I ever got called for jury duty was when I got my law license. I must
Oh
think that,
wow.
like you pop up on the Secretary of State's radar and they're like, all right, this person votes or this person, has their law license. They're going to discharge their civic duty if they get a summons to appear. And that was the only time I called. But pretty,
I, get- I used to get called for jury duty a bunch in Houston, and I only went once.
and you don't vote. So I wonder what it could be. I think my working theory might be incorrect. But see, all these things, guilty pleasures and unpopular opinions, if they're not making their way into G Hole regularly anymore, what are some things that people can expect from G Hole, which comes out on Mondays and Thursdays, or?
Basically, yeah. There's we put out 2 a week, and it's almost always Sunday night, Monday morning, or and it's definitely Monday morning, and then another episode usually Wednesday or Thursday.
And so,
We a lot of it depend. I mean, like a lot of podcasts, we talk about current events, but both Ray and I are big sports fans. So even though obviously not a lot of sports happening nowadays, but like when that Michael Jordan documentary was out, we were always talking about that. Um, and a lot of it is depends on who the guest is. I mean, now with the quarantine and stuff, obviously we like to find out what people are doing during the quarantine,
right.
and pretty much everybody we've ever had on the podcast is a comedian.
Yeah.
So just trying to find out what people are doing uh, for comedy during this quarantine thing.
And with that many great comics on there, it's never gonna be boring. I know a lot of the former, I looked at your guest list. I think you've been going on for a year or so, and you might have about 40 episodes. And I recognize Jonas Barnes, Tom McCaffrey, and
No,
Janelle Draper.
we're in season 2.
Oh wow,
Ray
really?
Ray Ray put Ray made us we're in season 2. I think we're over 50 episodes. For some
Oh,
reason
boy.
when he got to 50, I think it was around a year.
Okay.
Uh but he was just like, "Oh, well, I'm at," because somebody brought that up. Oh, we had the guy from the Keith and the Girl podcast. Keith O'Malley
Yeah.
or Keith Malley, and he like really did a bunch of research on us. Like we had him on our podcast, and he did a bunch of research, and he had said how oh man, I lost my train of thought. What was I
But that's
talking
cool.
about?
Yeah, Keith. Yeah, you were talking about seasons and things like that, and you guys are finally on
Oh
season
yeah,
two.
and then he goes, "Oh, I see you're in season 2," and I was like, "What?" And Ray's like, I go, "We made season 2. All right, I didn't know we got picked up." And Ray was like, "Oh well, yeah, we got to 50," and I was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh, that's not bad."
Yeah.
But this guy Keith thought it was like kind of a, "Oh, you guys made it to season 2," and it was like, "Well, yeah, I guess Ray's still paying the Libsyn bill."
And does Libsyn get blown out to things like Spotify, etc., or do people just go to Libsyn?
You're saying, is it like on all the other podcast things?
Yeah, is it on Apple and
Uh,
iTunes?
oh
And
yeah.
okay, okay. Yeah, you can't
Yeah,
get a spot.
I don't. I would think the majority of people, listen to it off of iTunes and the podcast things. I don't know. We post all the links,
Okay,
but
so they
yeah,
can
it's
find.
available on all that. And also now, uh, with us doing it's on Zoom, and we actually do it as video, and we put the video up on YouTube,
Okay, and
so you can
they can get
actually.
all those links from Bob Biggerstaff, comicbob.com, and I follow G Hole Pod on Twitter as well.
Yeah, the G Hole Pod on Twitter. Pretty sure it's the same name, the G Hole Pod on Instagram. So yeah, I always post it on. Actually, I don't even know if I hope Ray doesn't hear this. I don't know if there's a link to it on my website. I know Ray hardly uses his website. I mean, I
Okay.
try to at least, update my calendar, which obviously hasn't been updated in a while.
Right.
Although I am doing a show in Altoona, Pennsylvania on when is that? On June 26th, I believe.
The world is opening up. Bob Biggerstaff is going
Yeah.
to be in Altoona, Pennsylvania on June 20.
Polished comedy at McGarvey's, some bar,
Yes.
and I don't have a link for tickets or anything, but I will. I'll have that on my. I will have that on my website and Twitter and stuff.
Yeah, we follow you on social. You're
If
at Bob
anybody's in the Altoona, Pennsylvania area, June 26th. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, check him out. I follow him on Twitter. Bob Biggerstaff is Bob_Biggerstaff, and we thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you, Bob Biggerstaff.
Hey, no problem, Brian. Thanks for having me, buddy.